All right, welcome to Ideation, and thanks for tuning in. We are today going to be talking about the second stage in the design process, which is also sometimes referred to as the sketch phase, or in this case, we're going to refer to it as ideation. Before we begin, I'd love for you to just do a think, pair, share, to think about what is the purpose of ideation, and you can just discuss together as a group. So you can pause the video here and just discuss what is the purpose of ideation. So ideation actually allows for designers to generate a number of ideas or solutions within a designated amount of time. And so we want to think about this as students are thinking about the playground apparatus and how they are actually going to generate lots of different ideas for how they might redesign this space to meet the needs of the kindergarten students that are going to be using it. So there are a couple of different ways that we can do ideation, and we're going to show you two different ways today. You are actually going to go through your own ideation protocol in the form of Lotus Blossom, and we'll give you a different challenge question that you can be looking at. And so when we are thinking about ideation in general, it's really about taking one idea, thinking divergently. So you can see here we've got our challenge idea or topic with lots and lots of different ideas that come out of it. And then from there we think more convergently, where we're starting to narrow in that focus again before we go divergently again with our thinking. So it's really about going through those momentums and really iterating on those ideas and going deeper before we can really settle on the one final idea or solution that we want to stick with. So you are actually going to be doing your own ideation, as I mentioned, and we're going to be doing 2 rounds of Lotus Blossom. And so in front of you, you should have a piece of paper and a writing apparatus for you to generate lots of different ideas. So I'll give you a moment just to grab that if you don't have it. And again, feel free to pause the video at any time. So when we are thinking about a Lotus Blossom, this is what round 1 would look like. So you would have your challenge topic or idea placed in the center. You can just draw boxes, or if you wish, you could use sticky notes. And then you are going to generate 8 different ideas on how you are going to solve that problem. And so to give you an example, we wanted to use a challenge of disengaged young voters. So we found that there weren't a lot of youth within Canada and the US that were voting in elections because they just had different reasons as to why not. And so we came up with 8 different ideas on how to solve this problem. The first one was to come up with local meetups. We thought, let's use Snapchat stories where politicians can answer questions, because we remember back from when we interviewed our users, they really like social media. We thought again about bringing in that technology component by coming up with an app that allowed people to vote. Then we thought, why not have social media influences where people could get inspired by different people on how to vote. We wanted to have a component about surveys and seeing what matters to young people. And then we thought, because we were targeting young individuals as our target audience, we thought, why not put voting stations near places that they might go? So if we're targeting colleges and universities, there might be an on-campus bar or something that we could put a voting station. Then we thought about town halls, and we also thought about using alternative media like Vice News to really help get the information and the platforms across. So what we are going to be doing for our own ideation challenge is looking at this idea of ideation in the classroom. So the question that I'm going to pose to you is, how might we effectively use ideation tools in the classroom? And I want you to think beyond the scope of just this design project and think about where actually there is place for ideation in all components of your teaching. And so what I would do is, in the center of your page, you can write this, how might we? And then you will take 8 ideas on how you could effectively use ideation tools in the classroom. So it might be for a specific project, it might be a specific task, or a specific time where you think that it would be valuable. And so I want you to spend some time coming up with 8 different ideas. Again, this should be done independently, because you are all teaching different sections in your classes and you all teach different grades and topics. And so I would encourage you to use an independent brainstorm activity for this question. Again, you can pause the video. Another way to do this is to set that rapid fire piece into this is to set a 40-second timer and to have 40 seconds per idea. So you will have 40 seconds for idea 1, 40 seconds to come up with idea 2, and so on and so forth. Alternatively, you could set a timer for about 5 minutes and generate as many different ideas. You want to come up with 8 ideas on how you might address this question. When we are doing a lotus blossom, we want to go deeper. So we've done our initial brainstorm, but now it's the time to build off of those ideas. So you've just generated lots of ideas for how you might effectively use ideation tools in your classroom. The second round of ideation takes one of those ideas that you just came up with, and it comes up with 8 other related ideas. And so in a true lotus blossom, you actually end up with 64 ideas because you have your 8 initial ideas, and then with those 8 ideas, you have 8 more per idea, which leaves you with 64 ideas. So you can see here that we really like this idea of the voting app, and we came up with 8 different ideas on how to actually make this come to life. And so mostly what we showed here was the different screens that we could include. So we could have a welcome video from a trusted source. We could issue polls to find out what matters to users. So thinking again about our youth users, what issues are they passionate about? We could have live meetings with candidates. People could set voting, put in their address and figure out where the closest voting station is. We could have information about the issues in easy to understand language. We could have videos on how the political system works. We could feature celebrities with personal stories in terms of voting. And we also wanted to think about how they could connect policies to their lives. So you can see here we took one of our 8 ideas and we came up with 8 other ones. So for your second round of Lotus Blossom, after you are thinking about how you might use ideation tools with effectiveness in your classroom, you are going to think of the questions, how might we support a student who is stuck? So if you've come up with an idea for ideation, how are you going to support a student who is stuck with that particular activity? So think about what are some questions you can generate to push them to go deeper and to really scaffold and support this process for them. So again, you may want to set a timer for 40 seconds per idea or about 5 minutes and really go deep into some of those ideas here. Again, I would encourage you to pause the video at this point. When you are running through ideation with students, it is super important that before you even begin generating ideas to determine the constraints that students must work within. So first off, it's important to consider which grade team makes up the design team. They should be the ones setting the criteria. So they should be the ones that have unpacked that problem with the kindergarten students and to think about what is actually important in terms of including this. Then we also want to make sure we know which grade is ideating. So are they aware of the constraints? They also need to be made aware of what their users, in this case, the kindergarten students, what did those kindergarten students say that they wanted within their play structure? And again, what are some of those things that we need to include? So for example, we may want to think about safety. What safety components need to be included? Perhaps there's a slide that we want to include. So perhaps we must make sure there's a slide. Maybe there's fencing or safe soft ground, such as like recycled tires. So thinking about all of these key pieces, the grade that is actually going through ideation must be made aware of those constraints and the criteria they must consider. And they must also be made aware of what their users' unmet needs are. So in terms of being able to set that up, there must be a time where both grades are collaborating and that information is being shared with students. So again, you also want to consider if your students have spoken to a company who may help build this playground. So what are their specific requirements? They may have things that must be included in order to actually build a proper playground structure. And so it must be included in that ideation as well. In the curriculum that we've issued you, it talks about Crazy Eights as our ideation tool. So we use Lotus Blossom just now for our own ideation methods, but for students, you may want to use something called Crazy Eights. With Crazy Eights, you would take a piece of legal size paper and fold it in half 3 times to create 8 rectangles on it. So again, you may want to fold your paper widthwise, then lengthwise, then widthwise again. When you open it up, you will have 8 boxes. Then you can set a timer, again allowing 40 seconds per square so that students can draw one sketch every 40 seconds with pictures and words to explain how they would solve that problem. Of course, they are remembering that how might we question. So an example of Crazy Eights might look like this, and you can see here that we've drawn those thick lines where those fold pieces would be. And so that's really to highlight that paper being folded. Again, depending on the age and the readiness of your students, you might find that 8 ideas, 40 seconds per box is a little bit too much for them. You may want to do 4 boxes, so crazy 4s, and give like 2 minutes per box. So whatever meets the needs of your students. Of course, you know them best, so you want to make sure it's adapted to meet their needs. We also encourage using Sharpie just because it allows students to brain dump their ideas without overthinking them, and it allows them to use sort of a heavier marker for them to use. That way they're not getting bogged down on the details. So you can see here stick figures are encouraged, just simple drawings to help generate those ideas. They do not need to share their ideas, and again, their ideation should be done independently. So even if you have students working in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 on their playground design to pitch their ideas, each student should have their own ideas on Crazy Eights, and this way, when they come back together a little later on, they are able to take the best of everybody's ideas to create one consolidated plan, as opposed to then just generating 8 ideas as a group of 3 or 4. Once they finish their Crazy Eights, it's time for them to build them out a little bit more. And so there's a couple of different options for this. The first is to choose several ideas from Crazy Eights and show 3 different features of their solution. So they would choose 3 of their ideas for this playground, and they would build them out. You can see here that we just had an 11 by 17 piece of paper. We've got a little image drawn on those sticky notes, and then we have that full information next to it. And what they should be doing is being able to explain what is happening in each component of that drawing there. So their storyboard can stand on its own, and people could read it and be able to generate feedback. And so when they're thinking about their playground design, they might be thinking about, okay, what are 3 aspects or 3 components of my playground? Why am I including it? How is it meeting my users' needs? Another way is to take one idea and explain it in 3 steps. So first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. This could be used for this playground redesign if there is a specific component that really needs to go into greater depth and detail on how it works. Again, you want to make sure that all the ideas that students are coming up with are meeting the needs of their users, and also keeping in mind that criteria and those constraints. So both of these options are explained in great detail within the curriculum for how students are creating their storyboards. Again, even if students are working collaboratively, they should each be coming up with their own storyboard, and that way they can get feedback on lots and lots of different ideas. After they get feedback on their ideas, that is when they are going to start to think about iteration and seeing where they can pull out those commonalities. We will talk about iteration a little later on in that live video that we have coming up in a couple of weeks. Right now, we just want to really go deep into that ideation. So to think about critiques, we are going to move into the 3rd step of the design process. And so again, this is where students are moving from that sketch phase, and they are moving from that sketch phase and going into those critique phase there. So part of critiques is really about ensuring designers have incorporated the criteria, and so they're thinking about ways that they have incorporated what those musts are and those users' unmet needs are within their designs. And it is really about pulling out the positive and highlighting those opportunities there, and so thinking about what have they done well and where are there opportunities for them to go deeper. And so this is where the activity 2 Stars and a Wish really comes into great play, where you can either use a large sticky note and students can write their 2 stars and 1 wish, or you could have use the information that's found in the curriculum to really go deep here with that. There is a handout that's in the curriculum that talks about 2 stars and a wish that students may want to use, but it's really about providing that positive feedback initially and then thinking about where they might be able to go deeper. Again, it's important to have these considerations. So which grade team will be responsible for critiques, and how will the critiquing team and the design team coordinate to discuss highlights and opportunities? So it's important that these kids are coming back together to be able to share, okay, these are the ideas, let's get some feedback on their ideas, and then where are we going to move forward with these ideas? So you want to make sure that that is planned well in advance, and that there's a very clear indication of who is responsible for which piece here. As always, we want you to post any questions that you may have to Slack. We do hope that you also share back with us what you are doing. So talking about the ideation tools you've used with your students, if you want to share back some of the user interview pieces that your students have gone through, that's a really great way to get feedback and to, again, create this collaborative learning environment. So for you, what you are going to be doing is you're going to complete that first round of ideation for yourselves, thinking about where ideation fits in effectively in your classroom. Then you want to go deeper with a second round of ideation where you're thinking about supporting students that may need help. And then you want to make sure you are setting students up, okay, what is the criteria for this project? What are the users' unmet needs? How is that being communicated to the ideation team? And then students can go through the ideation process. As always, if you have questions, let us know. Otherwise, good luck.